Today I'm sitting down with Sonita to talk about one of our favourite films, David Fincher's Gone Girl. We meticulously go through the plot, sorting out what was real or misdirection, subjective experience or twisted perspective. We analyse what makes Rosamund Pike and Ben Affleck so perfect for their respective roles while attempting to identify their 2026 equivalents in our modern recasting. We go through our favourite quotes and scenes as well as discuss the score, cinematography and so much more. But for now, sit back, relax, and welcome to my film club. Gone Girl is a tale of modern love and marriage gone wrong to the point of insanity. So, it made sense that the only person I could talk about this film was my significant other, Sonita. So, Sonita, on that note, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Not sure how I feel about you making that comparison, but anyway.
I seriously do think it is an interesting one to talk about with your partner because it brings up so many things about what a relationship is, what love is, how you deal with these things in this day and age, what we would do in certain situations.
Yeah.
But it can be interesting, funny, potentially traumatic. But yeah, and also important to say, this is also one of your favorite movies as well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So let's start off with, do you remember when you first saw this movie / just your general background with it?
I think I saw it when it first came out. I don't know if it was in the cinema or at home, but I immediately loved it. That's one thing I definitely remember.
Yeah, I saw it so it came out in 2014, and I know that was a time when I was heavily going to the cinema, so I feel like I must have seen it in the cinema. But same, I don't have a really vivid memory of the first time, but I know I've rewatched it probably 5-10 times since, and you said probably about 5.
5, I think, yeah.
I've realized this as I'm saying it, that you know those movies where you really need to watch it once to get the story, you need to get to the end. I feel like those are the ones that you don't really remember the first time as much, because you probably only really remember getting it the second or third time.
Yeah.
So I think it leaves less of an impression. So why is this movie one of your favorites? Without giving too much away, guys, for now we're doing spoiler free and we'll let you know when we start talking spoilers. But without giving too much away,
Yeah.
why do you like this movie?
So I love the psychological thriller genre, is what I would say to start with. And this one is, I think, very well made, very well acted, lots of twists and turns that keep you guessing. And I don't think that's too many spoilers.
No, I think anyone who goes in having not seen this movie or not really remembering does remember that there is some psychological thrilling going on.
Yeah.
So my spoiler-free description, the idea here, guys, is that if you haven't seen this film or you've seen it but you barely remember it, we're trying to give you a taster so you can decide if maybe you want to pause this podcast and go watch it and then come back and hear all of our thoughts about it. So my spoiler-free description would be a psychological crime thriller about a woman's disappearance in suburban Missouri and the investigation / media frenzy about whether her husband killed her. You know, giving some things away, but that's all in the first 5 minutes, so I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. I think that's a good description.
So as I said, this film was released in 2014 and is based on the novel of the same name by Gillian Flynn. The book came out 2 years before. It was a New York Times bestseller, topped the New York Times bestseller, because being a New York Times bestseller doesn't actually mean that much these days, but being number 1 on the New York Times bestseller list really does. Sold 2 million copies in its first year and apparently 20 million by 2019. I'm sure the movie had a lot to do with that too. So the movie was a critical and commercial success. It topped the box office for 2 weeks and is still David Fincher's biggest opening film. So that means bigger than Seven, Fight Club, or The Social Network. Do you want to guess the reviews? So let's start with Rotten Tomatoes, both the professionals and the audience. What do you think they scored it?
I feel like I'm always really bad at this. I think the critics maybe like in the 80s.
You're going to need an exact score.
I'm going to say 84.
Okay, and then
then
the audience?
Audience, I would say probably 80.
So the reviewers gave it 88.
Reviewers, okay.
The professionals.
Yeah.
And the audience gave it 87. So pretty much exactly the same, which is very rare, but it's always nice to see that they can agree for once.
Yeah.
And then you want to guess the IMDb score?
A 7.6.
8.1.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy with that.
And it's number 190 on the IMDb all-time list, and it's David Fincher's third film on that list, so good on him. It grossed $381 million on a $61 million budget, making it one of the most profitable movies of 2014. This was quite surprising. It only had 1 Oscar nomination, let alone no wins. Do you want to guess what that was for?
Surely for Rosamund Pike.
Yes, Best Actress.
Yeah.
But she lost that. But I'm shocked looking back, and I think it's a travesty looking back that it didn't. It should have gotten everything. It should have gotten directed,
Yeah.
cinematography, score, maybe not acting for Ben. I mean, I could have seen him be nominated at the very least, and she should have won, but she didn't. So the final part I like to do before we hit the spoiler line is, who would you recommend this movie to? What sort of person would you say when they say, what should I watch this weekend? Would you say, watch Gone Girl?
Quite a lot of people, actually. Well, basically anyone that I know that enjoys a kind of mystery, I guess, which is a lot of people. I wouldn't feel bad recommending this to most people that I know.
Yeah, I could see, I'd recommend, I mean, I think they've seen it, but I'd recommend this to my parents. I'd recommend this to younger friends, anyone. If anything, it might be easier to say who you wouldn't recommend it to. The only people who I'd say you wouldn't want to recommend it to is someone who needs to at all times know what's going on.
Yeah, or maybe someone who is it's a bit too close to their personal experience. Again, we're maybe about to enter the spoiler-free line, but like the whole marriage component thing.
I think it is actually fair to say before the spoiler line, you're right, that there definitely can be some upsetting themes that could be triggering to some. So yes, in terms of just call it abuse in a relationship, and potentially abuse of various kinds, that can definitely be triggering for that. But anyone who enjoys a good movie, who enjoys a mystery, we were talking about this I was saying the other day about movies either being a thinker or enjoyment, but I think this is such a good blend because it definitely makes you think, but it is a fun watch, especially when you watch it a couple of times and you know where you're going with it.
Yeah, I don't like too much of a thinker, and it's just enough for me. Yeah.
All right, well, on that note, we're going to cross the spoiler line. So we've tried up until this point to not give too much away. So if you haven't seen this movie or you're quite blurry on it, we would highly recommend pausing this video or this podcast now, watching, and come back in a couple of days and hear of us dissect every last part of this movie. But from now on, you have been warned that we will be discussing spoilers. Everything from the characters, the ending. We're going to talk about everything. Let's talk about the entertainment value, which we kind of just touched upon before the spoiler line, but we can go into more detail now. You said this movie's a bit of a thinker, but not too much, which means it is mostly a fun ride. Describe the ride. Why do you enjoy watching this movie over and over?
I enjoy the kind of the thing that it keeps you guessing. I think one thing I will say is, even though I'd watched it before, even when I watched it the second time, and I don't know how many years was between the first watch and the second watch, but I couldn't remember a lot of basically where it was going, what some of the twists were, and still, even now when I rewatch it, there's still something else that comes up for me that I didn't necessarily notice the time before. I'm not saying that's the same for everyone. That might be just the way that I digest movies, but I find it still very interesting to this day when I rewatch it. And I've only seen it maybe 5 or 6 times, but yeah, it doesn't feel like that to me.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think if I were to attempt to describe the different viewings, first time, actually, let's start with this. The first time you watch it, did you think he had murdered her? Because I was trying to remember that of the part. You did? Because I can't remember if I did.
I think I did, we'll get into this a bit more, but I just feel like part of how he is when he's discovering the house in the first moment he sees that she's missing, it is almost the way he's reacting. And obviously they make it so that it feels like that. To me, it did feel very suspicious. And then obviously the way the detectives first kind of interact with him and stuff. So I was being led down that path. Okay. And I think maybe also just the way that he comes across.
Yeah, which is why he plays his character so well, the ambiguity. Yeah. I almost feel, now I've seen it so many times, and the fact that he doesn't even try to seem shocked, to me, almost seems anti-suspicious, because if he had killed her, I think, well, surely he would put on more and seem more upset. He's kind of so bad at hiding how he feels that I think surely not. But the more I've thought back on it, I'm pretty sure that, like everyone, until halfway through the movie, I thought, oh, well, he's done it.
Yeah.
But that is the beauty of the movie, that you see it one way the first time, and then afterwards you see it differently. I think the second time, if you watched it right after, sure, but most normal people don't, and we probably watched it again a couple of years later, and I think the second time you remember the twist, you remember that she's not dead, but you probably forget pretty much the rest. And I think by the third or the fourth time, you kind of remember, even if it's years and years apart. This time, for example, I remembered all of the main parts of the plot, so I remember that she goes back. I actually think I might have forgotten about the pregnancy thing, which is such a big thing. But it is still a detail, because I guess you don't see a baby or anything. I remember Neil Patrick Harris getting murdered and stuff. And then when you get really deep, that's when there'll be a line at the beginning of the movie, or even there's a lot of symbolism in this. And obviously researching it helps pick up on all those things. But that's where, even on the 15th, 20th time, you'll pick up, and they're getting more and more insignificant. But they'll be like, oh, there's this book on this bookcase which actually represents everything they're doing at that time. And that is the beauty of a well-made movie, is that it takes you on a unique ride the first time, and then you get to appreciate it over and over again.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, this is a beautiful is a strong, it's an interesting movie to watch and feel. We'll talk about that more when we talk about the production, but I think it's important to say in terms of the entertainment that it's an interesting movie to listen to and see, because there's so much going on behind the camera. They're not just filming what's on the script. They're very much giving. It's a vibes movie, is the best way to put it. The score, the cinematography, the atmosphere, again, we'll talk about that, but I think that's definitely a part of what makes it an intriguing movie.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if this falls into this category, but I would say I like the actual structure itself of the going back and forth between the present day crime scene investigation and then going back to the love building story. I like that. And then it would, throughout the movie, it'll say like 3 days gone. It will come up on the screen, and then obviously you're watching like almost in snippets.
Yes,
I quite like I don't know if it's the structure or what you would call that, but yeah, that I find.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. When we do the story, we're going to do it chronologically just for simplicity, but I think it is a good way to tell it. Because in the book, I'm reading the book, I haven't finished it, which is why I won't talk about it too much, but also we're focusing on the film, not the book. But the book is very similar. It literally alternates chapter by chapter. It is him in the present and her diary. So you'll have basically the opening scene of the bar and everything, and then it'll go back to them meeting. So very, very similar to the movie. And that was one of the appeals of the book. And you kind of need that structure to have for the plot twist to work. The fact that you basically have half the movie where you think he could have done it, and then, hey, she's alive.
Yeah.
And yeah, that is part of it. Also, and we'll talk about this a lot in the dialogue, but I think it would never qualify as a comedy, even a dark comedy. I think it's just down to the writing. I think it's a funny movie. There's a lot of one-liners.
Yeah, it is very funny. I've actually, and we'll get to this when we talk about the dialogue specifically, but quite a few of my favourite quotes are funny ones, I would say.
Yeah, well, I think, most of them. And then, again, we'll talk about this more in the details, but just why I enjoy it is the characters. All the characters I find fascinating. You might like some of them more than the others, but she's intriguing, even if you think she's crazy. He's frustrating, but also you kind of want to see him go through it. He's kind of like especially for the first half where he doesn't know what's going on. When you're rewatching it is like watching a hamster on a wheel, like, oh wow, he's going through this, and you feel bad for him, but also you feel good that he's going through this because he's such a bad guy. So yeah, I think the characters and their development and their story and understanding their backstory, because again, reading the book, you understand there's so much that they don't get to in the film, but they hint at, whereas in the book, there's so much of that. So kind of piecing that together as you watch it, it's just like one throwaway line, it really builds the characters every time you watch it.
Yeah. Maybe we'll talk more about this as we go through as well, but that's part of my enjoyment of this movie, is knowing how wrong it is and twisted, and how wrong she is and very much a criminal, and yet how satisfying it is to watch her plan be executed and for him to go through a lot of the torment that he does as both flawed characters, but he's not so flawed that he deserves this, and yet you still enjoy watching him go through it.
100%. I've written here that I think my favorite scene is actually the one right after it's revealed that she's alive, and it just shows the montage of her doing all the things, because and I just love those scenes, just seeing basically the first half of the movie being explained in about 2 minutes, and just show everything you just said about like her. I love that part. So moving on to the story. So the way we're going to do this is we're going to go through the plot, and some bits we'll go through quickly, just kind of to take the audience through in case they haven't watched this movie in a while. And it is quite a plot dense movie. And then if there are scenes that we want to stop and chat about, then we'll do just that. We're going to do this chronologically, except for the opening scene, because obviously when you watch it for the first or even third time, you don't realize that the opening shot is actually the closing shot. And it opens with that line, "Whenever I think of my wife, I think of her head."
Yeah.
So yeah, you said you really love that opening scene.
Yeah, I do. So yeah, it's Nick's narration, and as you said, it's him talking about her head. But then I've written this down so I don't get it wrong. But he says, "I picture cracking her lovely skull and spooling her brain, trying to get answers." And when you see it in the opening scene, you're like, "Well, this guy is really twisted. Like, what is the matter with him?" And then you watch the movie, and as you say, see this in the closing scene, and you're like, "Yeah, same." Like, like
Yeah.
what a weirdo. What is going through her head?
Yeah, the ultimate double entendre.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, it's a great shot. It's a great way to open it. And yeah, it's a great way to start the mystery of what the fuck is this movie about.
Yeah.
So again, obviously the next scene in the movie is him basically finding out that she's gone, but then in the movie they jump back and forth. So rather than go back and forth here, we're just going to do this chronologically in terms of the story. Their story starts when they meet at a party in New York City, and they have this sort of meet cute, and they're just both charming as fuck.
Yeah.
So the movie, I think, is meant to take place around the time it was written, so 2012, and they met 5 years before, so pre-2008. My point is, they're having an actual normal meeting at a party, but I feel like their chat is very dating appy. They're both just trying to show that, oh, we're funny and we're quirky and let's make fun of other people. And so, but you immediately get they're both really charming and they're both smart and stuff. And I think it starts off on a really good foot in terms of dynamics of their relationship, and it very much brings up the cool girl image immediately.
Yeah, agreed. Not normally stuff that people would just relay on the spot when they're meeting each other.
It's very David Fincher, written by
is.
David Fincher. But you know what? That's why we love these movies.
Yeah.
So then after that is again, chronologically, the next scene of their courtship. So they've obviously been dating for a while. They've been having all the New York fun, I'm sure. And that's when they have the Amazing Amy book party, which so it's celebrating Amazing Amy gets married. So Amazing Amy is the character that her parents have been writing ever since she was a kid, which is kind of a perfected version of her life. So that's really interesting, where they say, oh yeah, I wasn't very good at tennis. She became a tennis champion. I wasn't allowed to get a dog. Amazing Amy got a dog. And here at this point, she's in her late 30s and she hasn't gotten married yet. And this book is about her getting married. So we're introduced to the parents, this whole dynamic, which is we'll talk about it more in her character, but I think it's the reason she's fucked up, is this whole Amazing Amy relationship. But yeah, and that's when he proposes to her. But you had some thoughts on that whole scene.
Yeah, I love the journalism Nick proposal is what I've called it. Because at that point she's being grilled by the rest of them at the table, and again, to your point about her not being married, and they're asking, how does this, how is it in your real life, and is there a marriage on the cards and all of that sort of stuff. And you can tell she's starting to, like, she's answering quite well, but she's obviously starting to get quite annoyed by it all. And that's when he swoops in again in a very smooth fashion, asking various questions, and then kind of reveals the ring as part of the proposal. And obviously it's a very interesting way to do it, but it's just very satisfying again to watch as a turnaround from how things had been a few moments before.
Yeah, it's obviously not the most important one, but again, we're talking about one of the lines. You could write that scene funny and charming anyway, but then when he ends, and fun fact for our readers, you have a world-class vagina. Yeah. And I think, and this is why Ben Affleck is so great in this role, because you really need to 1 minute think, oh, he lights up every room, he's super charming, who wouldn't fall in love with him? But then the next, you need to be believable that he's a slob on the sofa, drinking beers in the middle of the day, playing video games, not caring about getting a job. Well, for fun, we'll do the recasting later, and I find that was actually the really hard thing about recasting him, is the fact that it really needs to be believable. I would find actors who I'd say, oh, they'd be great at doing this part, but then you just wouldn't. But like Tom Hiddleston was a perfect example. You can imagine him being the charming part, but then I just can't imagine him with his suave British accent saying, oh no, I don't care, I don't need to get a job, laptops are for laptopping and stuff like that. But Ben Affleck is just perfect for that.
Yeah, he is.
Amazing Amy introduced the proposal, they get married. I don't think they show them married, and that's when things go to shit. So I think another super interesting thing for this movie, so we were obviously young adults when this movie came out, and we were still at university in 2008, but the 2008 crisis and the unemployment in the US is a huge, and all of the resulting societal issues in the US is a huge part of the background of the story, which we'll talk about later. But that's what happens. They both lose their job because of the 2008 financial crisis. First him, then her. She loses her trust fund, so she has a huge trust fund that basically her parents, all the money they've made off using her childhood, they've put into a trust fund, bought her this beautiful brownstone that they live in, and they come to her and say, yeah, we need all that money back because we're broke. And that's when basically they kind of had the perfect life before this point. They live in New York City. They're both young, hot, no children. They both are writers. They both have these amazing they're both probably not super well paid, but jobs that they both enjoy. They have the security of almost $1 million in the bank. They live in a beautiful house. Everything's perfect. And then not only does everything go bad, but everything goes bad very, very quickly. I think in about a year, they go from everything being perfect to his mother dying, and they move back to Missouri with a little bit of money that she has left. She buys the bar. They just keep, nothing works. In Missouri, she's miserable. He then starts hanging out with his sister all the time and drinking a lot more. She buys him the bar, so they have a business. He has an affair, and then apparently, I think the affair is the trigger point where she suddenly decides, I'm going to fuck this guy's life up.
Yeah.
One thing that's important that they introduce in the midst of this is the anniversary treasure hunt tradition, which is every year she puts a treasure hunt, which is just a series of hints kind of reminiscing about their relationship, which on reflection I find very toxic because he's clearly not into it.
Yeah.
And she's basically saying this is what's important in our relationship and you need to remember it. And if you don't, you're a terrible boyfriend. And he very much gets that message.
Yeah. It's a lot of effort as well. I don't know. But in a weird way. It's almost like the whole doing lots of little things every day if you're genuinely happy, like with the other person, versus her like performative version of their relationship where they're both like different versions of themselves, and then she's doing this whole like theatrical treasure hunt thing instead of just being a good partner like consistently. I don't know, I find it all a bit weird.
It's weird, and there is also just a eulogization of their relationship. Is, oh, we're so cute and we're so amazing that every year there's all these things that I'm going to write riddles about. And obviously it's nice to have, we have photos of us and our friends and stuff, but it would just be weird if all you had were pictures of yourselves in, professionally taken photo shoots and just glamorizing everything about it. And I just think it's the one-sidedness is very telling of their relationship, because I think it probably starts off as romantic for maybe the first couple of years in her mind, but he says from year one he couldn't get anything right. I think on the first one he got 2 out of 5 right, and then from then on he's basically not gotten a single one right.
Yeah.
And then she probably just uses that as a manipulation to make him feel shit about it, whether it's conscious or not.
Yeah.
So she does, because when she finds out about the affair, she decides to fuck up his life and frame him for her murder. And then she embarks on, so I did a freeze frame analysis of her plan, and it's pretty much a year and a half in the making. From
Wow.
the very first item on her list is find out where they're having sex. I found that. And then she has all the long-term stuff, for example, befriending the neighbor. Mm-hmm. She has a lot of reading. She has a lot of research. It's funny, that's one of those little things on rewatch, is when the police are investigating and asking, what does she do all day? And he's struggling to answer. And he says, she's an avid reader.
Yeah.
And she actually had a really long book list of things to read in preparation for the whole thing. So that was quite funny.
That is funny, because it is like, obviously that's true, but has he been seeing what she's been reading? Like how to carry out the perfect crime scene, all of that stuff.
That's such
like if he'd actually been paying attention, he could have,
that is actually
seen this coming.
That is an amazing point. I really don't think you could, because the amount of work she puts into at no point does she say in the prep, oh, and I did all of this to hide this from Nick. Nope. Yeah. She's watching all this stuff. She bought all of this stuff.
Yeah.
Then the big one is that she gets him to sign off on increasing the life insurance, which I think you said, we were talking about this yesterday. That would be game over right there. I'd be like, whoa. We need to talk about this. Why are we doing this? And the fact that he just does that.
Yeah.
Just shows how little he's paying attention, which again makes you think, oh, does he deserve it? Then we get to the present day. This is the opening scene before he finds her, where he's hanging out with his twin sister, Margot, playing in the bar. First of many drinks he has. Then he reports her missing after finding the crime scene. We meet the police. Then yeah, we're way into the whole part of him being suspicious. Then we have the awkward press conference with the smile. We meet the parents again. Then he goes down the treasure hunt, the current treasure hunt route, which takes him to his office where him and his mistress have been sleeping. Which when you're watching the film, this is the first time we get the hint that is having an affair.
Well, that's where the panties are
Exactly.
discovered. Yeah.
Panties are discovered. And I think at this point is where, we are probably suspicious from the beginning because of the opening line of cracking her head open. But the police everyone around him are at least hiding their suspicion for a while. But then when the mistress gets hinted of and he's super weird, this is when everything starts getting suspicious. And because it gets suspicious, he starts hiding things from the police. This is where he lies about the treasure hunt and hides one of the envelopes and tries to solve it by himself. So he looks worse and worse. And also in the film, this is where the diary, the flashback, starts showing him in a really bad light, mainly the time that he pushes her down on the floor. This is one which is confusing when you're rewatching it. Because obviously the first time you think, oh, he's an abusive husband, he definitely killed her. And then on rewatch, even this time, I think I said, wait, is this part true? Because having watched it, it doesn't feel true. I don't know, just narratively, if he is actually abusive, I feel like you lose the crowd there, then everyone would say, yeah, she should have killed him.
Yeah.
But they, again, one throwaway line much later in the film when she's revealing the plan and she talks about the diary entries and she says, talk about your lovely romance in New York and how you fell in love. That part is true. Then make up lies about him being abusive. So that does confirm that, and this is a very important part of the film and book, is the unreliable narrator aspect of we are shown and told things which we find out later are not true. And so him being physically abusive at that point is not true. I say at that point because he does slam her into the cupboard at the end. But if there's ever a time that you can maybe be a little rough is after someone has framed you for murder and then artificially inseminate themselves with your child in order to keep you around. Not justifying it, but if there was ever a time that you might lose your temper, it might be there.
Yeah.
So this is where everything's going to shit for him. The diary shows him being abusive. This is where we have the vigil. Emily Ratajkowski turns against him. This is where the friend reveals about the pregnancy. The diary is found. And I don't think they arrest him right immediately. I think they know at this point that it's going to look really suspicious to the viewer. So at this point is when they have the big reveal. She's still alive.
Yeah.
Then we get Amy's perspective and we find out she's very much alive. We get that iconic scene where she's just driving down the highway in her shitty car, eating the burger, and she just reveals everything that she knew about the cheating, that she's had this long plan, that she framed him for everything. And as I said, it's just a masterclass in deception. So the fake diary, the fake friends, the fake pregnancy, the fake crime scheme, the escape, everything.
This is one of my favourite scenes, both in how it looks, but also, as you say, it's a masterclass in how to carry out a crime, not without flaws, which we'll talk about. I have one of my favourite things is when she's explaining the whole cool girl thing, and about how like she tried to be. I think I've written down so I don't get it wrong. But when she says that she wax stripped her pussy raw. Something about drinking canned beer, blowing him semi-regularly, which is also just a really funny turn of phrase, I think. And then the crime itself, like I know you had a look at the actual like freeze frame, what her plan was, but even down to like befriending the local pregnant idiot or whatever she calls her, and seeing like how much thought has gone into it, and also how much time has obviously passed, like going through all these different pens, in the diary entry to make it look like it was over an even longer period of time. As much as I don't agree with obviously a woman resorting to this as a crime, it's very, very satisfying to watch.
So we'll talk later about the things that maybe could have been done differently, but I think up until this point, the midpoint, she kind of nails it. It kind of goes to shit from this point, actually. So in the movie chronology, this is when Ben Affleck realizes that this is all set up, and the thing that ticks him off is the credit card bills that the police show him, because I don't say he was that suspicious at this point because it's insane what she's done, but it's kind of irrefutable when someone says you've spent all this money and no one else knows, but he knows that he didn't do it. So I think at this point he knows, and as a result everything becomes quite clear that it's fake, including the anniversary hunt, which becomes very clear. She very much intended for him to know by this point, because the end of the anniversary hunt is basically a big fuck you.
Yeah. You mean the Punch and Judy thing? Yes. Yeah. This part, I feel like, so I didn't know a whole lot about, I don't, and we can cut this back if it's not relevant, but I didn't know a whole lot about actually the Punch and Judy story, but apparently there's a lot of symbolism to do with the story of what actually happens with the puppets
Right.
and the like falling apart of the whole marriage. So there's like a lot of, I think aside from the fact that it was a big fuck you in general, there's like a lot more to it, which I thought was quite interesting.
Yeah, and so I'm not familiar with the story either, but there is a whole thing. They do say something about there's a pregnancy involved in Punch and
And then
Judy.
he kills like the wife and the child in the Punch and Judy story, I think, which is obviously then like implied here
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, that's just a whole other level of fucked up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, a character who's I think he's shown on TV a couple of times and who's now hired is the Tyler Perry lawyer character. While in that happening, so this is kind of Ben Affleck begins taking action to defend himself because now he's really in trouble. So he hires a lawyer. He visits the ex-boyfriend who she accused of rape. I think it's an important thing to see that she did it before because it shows that this wasn't something that just got created by Nick. Is that she was insane when she met him because she'd done it before, framing an ex-boyfriend for rape. And then she obviously was happy with him, but then when things went badly, that came out of her again. Also, obviously we only get the ex's story, so maybe he had cheated on her as well. But the way he tells it, all that happened was that he kind of lost a bit of interest in her, and she framed him for rape, which obviously I guess is not as bad as framing for murder, but it's pretty awful as well.
That's like, maybe it's relative in her mind because she's like, right, you've lost interest in me, so I'm going to frame you for rape. And then Ben Affleck, when she meets him, he's actually cheating on her. So she's like, right, well, I'm going to up the ante and frame you for murder.
So things are not getting better, but at least Ben Affleck now has a defense and he's understanding more what's happening. Then Amy meets these her friends, her hillbilly friends, and gets her money stolen, which obviously is when things start to go to shit for her. Then there's the gummy bear scene, which I'm a big fan of, with Tyler Perry, of throwing the gummy bears at him, coaching him.
Yeah.
I don't know how they came up with that specifically, but it's just a really good visual of it, and it's just a funny scene. The interview goes well, but Emily Ratajkowski outs him as being a cheater right before, I think after they taped it, but before they do the interview, and definitely before it airs. So things are looking up for him a little bit. Then Amy meets up with Desi, Neil Patrick Harris, and he takes her to his chalet, which that whole 10 minutes put together is like a mini horror movie of its own.
It is. It really is. Just on that, his introduction of his home, like the way he takes her around and describes things, I know he's supposed to be, but like he's so douchey in that, and I think like he does it so well.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of Barney Stinson, but with no charm. It's just the pure, because the Barney Stinson is obviously a douche, but it's that, but without any of the charisma or whatever. And no one deserves to get their throat sliced, but it really helps you get over that by seeing how horrendous he is.
Yeah.
And it is fascinating how quickly you see how controlling he is. And it's hinted that she used to be controlling of him, but he's obviously turned the table, and now, I mean, he basically turns her into his voluntary prisoner. But also he knows that she has nowhere else to go, so he's very much using that situation to his advantage.
Yeah.
But she's not taking any of it. She starts scheming almost immediately.
Yeah.
So before the flash forward, so once she arrives at Desi's and the interview airs, then they find the credit card stash and in the midst of that, the Punch and Judy dolls. That's it. The Punch and Judy dolls are in the stash, and that's where they find the little bats, and they put it 2 and 2 together with the bat that was found in the fireplace, which is the murder weapon. So at that point, they arrest him. Then we flash forward, both in terms of him having gone through. He gets bailed out by Tyler Perry. She works her magic in terms of preparing for her escape. Then Amy frames Desi, kills him. Should we talk about that scene a little bit? Because it's quite something.
Yeah, we should. Well, also her planning towards that scene. So the whole, there's a scene, I think, where they're having breakfast maybe, and she kind of gives him a kiss before he leaves and like ruffles his hair and untucks his shirt. And I can't remember if by that point we don't know the reason why she's done that, but and it doesn't really make any sense. But then he's leaving the house, he's tucking his shirt back in and sort of smoothing his hair, and he's looking quite disheveled. And it's because she's obviously, again, part of her master plan, has located the cameras, the CCTV, and knows kind of that's going to make him look suspicious. So she's already, by this point, I don't know exactly how he framed it, but he implied that basically she was going to need to have sex with him at some point. And I can't remember exactly how he says it, but I think at that point, that's when she suddenly realizes she needs to save herself and obviously take him down as well.
I don't know if he says it or hints.
He says something like, I'm not going to force myself on you, but he's implied that
Yeah.
she should willingly come to him and start showing her affection.
Yeah, I mean, he brought her there and she's pretty much a prisoner because he knows she can't go anywhere else. He pretty much pressures her because she looks like shit when he finds her, especially compared to what he was used to. So, and she loses I think one of the main reasons why they flash forward a couple of weeks is because she loses all this weight. He gets her all these clothes and makeup and in his words, tweezers and razors and everything, just so she can pretty herself up. Obviously, he's preparing her to, he basically is saying, I expect you to have sex with me because I'm doing all of this for you.
Yeah.
And then one of those details that I only realized this time because it didn't quite make sense to me is if there are cameras everywhere, then surely you would see that he wasn't actually tying her up and raping her. But as I noted this time, the cameras are actually only on the outside, which is why she goes to that window where you can actually be seen on the cameras outside. And or even the stuff you were saying about him ruffling up. Obviously, if they were inside cameras, you would see that she did that to him, but there aren't. They're just on the outside. So she's controlling the narrative on the outside.
But that's part of what was weird. So this was part of what I read about on online. Again, it wasn't my thought necessarily, but a lot of people have said if that's the case, then there's going to be inconsistencies in the CCTV of the two of them arriving willingly together because the cameras are on the outside of the house. So like when they actually go there together, before she realizes she's fucked and she needs to take him down, he's not dragging her there unwillingly. He's not like, so it kind of looks like it's basically it's on good, they're on good terms when they arrive.
Yeah, I think her whole story about how she ended up with him, they never fully explain because at the end she tells a story to the FBI about what happened to her at the end and killing him and stuff, but she doesn't it's never implied that he actually kidnapped her from the beginning, is it?
I think it is. I think basically that's what ends up happening. So what I get, this is the beauty of me watching the film so many times and still not understanding fully, but I think her original plan was obviously to take down Nick and obviously then kill herself, and then he gets taken down, and then she realizes that she doesn't want to die, and she says something like, why should I die, I'm not the asshole, or whatever. And I don't know if that happens before or after her money gets stolen by the hillbillies, but basically at that point I wondered if that's when she was going to be like, right, well now I need to say that Desi has kidnapped me. I don't know exactly, or whether she was just going to him for money so she could like still carry out her plan of framing Nick.
My interpretation, so she says the why should I die to the hillbillies when they're playing mini golf right before she drops the money. So she says that when she's still got, probably we estimate a few $1,000s. So I think at that point she has decided she's not going to kill herself because why should I? But she has this money. We can discuss what she would have done at that point because I think she would have had problems, but she would have had options. Then she gets the money stolen, so she has nothing. She calls Desi out of desperation. I think maybe at this point she thinks that she can I don't think she has a long-term plan, but I think her short-term thing, and it works, is that he will take care of her and stuff. But I don't think she realized she knew that he was going to be as manipulative as he ends up being. He says, I'm not going to let you go this time, that she is a prisoner. Obviously, she wouldn't want to go anywhere, but if she felt like she could control him, she could probably be okay with that situation for a bit. Oh, no, and then another really important thing is the interview that Ben Affleck gives. The interview that he gives, and he pleads her to come back. This, I think, is a bit under the surface, but the whole point is that he's turning back on the charm of who he was when they met in New York, and he basically says to her, he subliminally tells her, I know what's going on, I know that you're still out there, but I can be the guy that you wanted me to be. Because the whole reason she does this is because and this is something that a lot of women relate to without having done the second part of what she does, is that you marry a man and then he stops being the man that you fell in love with. He's this hardworking, charming guy, but then he moves off to Missouri, loses his job, and is just drunk all day and stuff. And and part of that is then the cheating. But the part, she fell in love with a man who wasn't cheating on her.
Yeah.
And he basically says, I'm willing to be this person again if you will come back. And that's why when she comes back, and she says, you asked me to come back. So I think at that point, when she's weighing the potential of, I can either stay here and be this sex slave, in comfort and stuff, but I'll be in hiding for the rest of my life, or I can go back to him. I think that is where she decides because that is still before she does the transformation. I think she's only been at his Neil Patrick Harris for a couple of days when she sees that interview, and I think that's where she formulates that plan. But then, so she goes back and says, "Oh, so maybe the idea is that he had kidnapped her." I mean, if you can have the only shot, going back to your point, that would be suspicious is literally her getting out of the car and voluntarily walking into the home.
Yeah.
I feel like you could talk around that. You could say he had a gun on me. He brought me in the car. He said he would hurt me if I didn't cooperate. And that is literally the only shot until the one of her bleeding with the red wine.
Yeah.
So I think that story could hold. I mean, again, there's a lot of holes, but I think they do a pretty good job. So let's just get to the end and we'll wrap this up. So he does the interview. He's arrested. They flash forward. He's preparing his defense. It's not looking good. Amy frames Desi, kills him, escapes. Creepy sex scene. She comes back, tells him, nakedly basically admits to everything, but says, I'm never going to admit to it. We're stuck together. Mm-hmm. We need to stay together for appearances for a while. And then when he thinks he can finally get away, she announces that she's stolen his sperm and impregnated herself. We also don't know if that's 100% true, but let's just assume that it is.
Yeah.
And then we end with before the final shot, but they have the interview where they announce it and they just be this picture perfect couple again. But the thing I was referring to about kind of wrapping up her story is that scene in the hospital where there's all the police investigating her and the police officer asks these really good questions.
Yeah.
But she very much turns it against them and says, you guys fucked this up. You almost locked up my husband. I would be dead if it wasn't for you. And clearly, and then the FBI cut her off. I think they do say that because it's become such a big affair, it's become a federal investigation, so the local police haven't got any more control.
Yeah.
And this does happen in real life, that when something goes to shit, it doesn't really matter if there are little things that don't add up. They kind of just put their hands up and say, we're going to leave you alone now. And I think that's kind of the implication, because sure, you could investigate every last thing. You could find the hillbillies and interview them and find lots of discrepancies, but it's not in anyone's interest at that point to reveal the truth. So I think that's why they don't.
That bit is quite funny though, because I feel like the FBI are, they're all stood around, and the original police detective is finally asking like some quite hard-hitting questions that Amy, for once in her life, doesn't have a perfect answer to, and that's when she feigns the tiredness. Oh, I've just been through so much, I'm tired, and then immediately they're all just like, oh, okay, let's just like give her some rest or whatever. But she obviously knows. There's like, she does that really. This is one of the best like things I think she does with her whole like face during the whole movie, is like the way she looks at the main police detective, which is just like,
I know and but
yeah, like I'm not
you.
answering your questions, and also I've got the upper hand here, sort of thing. Like you all have to leave me to it, and I'm gonna get away with it.
And she's totally right, because at this point, it's the big lie theory.
Yeah.
If you tell us a huge lie, it's so much harder to call someone out on. And in this case, there's two truths. Either her story is true, and she was a sex slave who killed her captor, which, I mean, he hadn't done it yet, and he wasn't, as we say, he wasn't as bad as she portrayed it, but it was pretty bad, and she did need to get out of there. Or it's all nonsense, but it's a huge accusation, so no one, the cop, the FBI, don't have a leg to stand on. So to me, it is perfectly realistic that they would, at that point, maybe they should have investigated it more after that, but it's perfectly realistic they would just let it go.
Yeah.
And then also the media, which we'll talk about later in the themes, but the fact is, from a media point of view, and most of this is led by the media's point of view, there's no way at this point the police, it's going to look good for them to start suspecting her.
Yeah, that's true.
And then so it ends with that shot of the two of them lying together and him saying, I want to crack her head open and understand what she... And now, and at the end, like you said, yeah, don't we all?
Yeah.
So, yeah, you had some more notes on her plot.
Yeah, I think one of the things that the FBI, or no, not the FBI, but the police detective is saying in front of the FBI is like the whole box cutter thing of like, how did she get the box? Well, I mean, we didn't especially talk about this with the Neil Patrick Harris thing, but like the sex scene is that she obviously like entices him into the bedroom. They're having sex. She reaches under the pillow, grabs the box cutter, and then slices his throat, which is just the most like gruesome scene ever, even for someone who watches a lot of actual like horror films and stuff. But the whole thing is that she's told them that she's tied up at that point, and she's obviously managed to get away in the end. But I think the question that they ask before she's like, oh, I'm so tired, is like, how did you get the box cutter if you were tied up? That is just one of those things that I don't know how exactly I would do it better, but I feel like that is where she has gotten quite sloppy towards the end, and a lot of it is just like the desperation, I guess.
Yeah, that I think so. Just going back, so that definitely is a plot hole. Well, not a plot. It's not a plot hole. It's a story, a hole in her story.
Yeah.
But I guess you probably accurately realize that they aren't going to stop nitpicking that at that point. And it does show, because the fact is, there when she rapes herself with a bottle of wine before, she uses the box cutter to open the to take the paper, the foil
Yeah.
off the wine, which is obviously unnecessary. You don't need to do that. But I think the point of that is to show that that's where she gets the box cutter, which does show that Desi isn't actually, he's holding her psychologically prisoner, but the fact is she could walk out at any point, but
Yeah.
he just knows that she won't because she'd be in so much trouble. So she's making it seem so much worse than it is, in terms of the idea that she's tied up and that he's forcibly raping her and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, then she obviously isn't too bothered about that. But let's go back to the losing the money, because
Yeah.
so her original plan was to kill herself, but then she decided not to. What would she have done, basically between deciding not to kill herself and having the money lost? What could she have done after that? Because I think it wouldn't have been as dramatic as the Desi murder thing, but she would have eventually been in trouble.
Yeah, I actually don't know. I've played this through in my head, and I was like, if there's a world where she hadn't gone back to him, what can you actually do apart from, people say like skipping town, starting over, changing your identity, getting some sort of cash in hand job somewhere, presumably, because
She
you
wouldn't
wouldn't
have had a
hassle
social
any of the checks
No.
or like anything. So I don't know. I don't know how much any of that would have actually worked, but it just felt like it was very short-sighted by that point.
One of the things, as just a parenthesis, I like about movies that are based on books is there are little things in it, whether it's a detail of the story or just something that, like them having the cat, for example, isn't actually conducive to much in the story, but it's in the book. So it's normal that the movie would represent the book. Obviously, then you can nitpick about why was this in the book, and a lot of the details, there's a reason for them in the book. But my point is that you can't really nitpick on the story in a movie like this, because the story, they're just doing what was in the book. So I think one of the reviews said it's not a perfect story, but it's a near perfect movie that's based
Yeah.
on a story in a book. So my point here is coming back to the money being stolen is actually really good storytelling, because the fact is that it would have been boring, obviously, if she had just drowned herself.
Yeah.
That would have not been interesting either. But she needed to lose the money and for the rest of the movie to happen.
Yeah.
Because the long story of Amy, going down to her last dollar and doing God knows what. I mean, here's the thing. Maybe I'm answering my own question here. She probably would have just spent the money over the next couple of weeks, and she would have eventually gone to Desi anyway, because that just fast forwarded that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, she just basically lost that extra cushion that she had.
Yeah.
What do you think about the whole the scene where she does drop the money? I like, because I have my own perspective. I don't know why she's golfing with them, and I don't remember this friendship actually forming. It goes, in my mind, it goes from her declining the invitation on the first day with the girl to all of a sudden that she's out golfing with the girl and what seems like her boyfriend or a friend. I don't know what this is, but it just seems strange to me.
I agree. It is a bit weird, but I think, because at this point she's been alone for a while, and despite being a sociopath, I think she does still have certain social needs, and she hangs out with the girl before that to watch the interview, although
Yeah.
the girl does offend her and she spits in her Mountain Dew.
Yeah.
So I'm not exactly sure why she made go. I think part of it is the fact that those two, especially the girl, are very insistent on being friends, so you feel that even on the first invite that she turns down, that it's awkward for her to turn it down.
Yeah.
So I think it's probably a mix of the fact that she does enjoy talking to other people, and the fact that she feels this pressure to hang out with them, and because, again, the movie needs to happen.
Yeah.
But so they're not. So I think both of them are meant to be on the run as well from domestically abusive partners, including him, and then the hillbillies, the male and female. They've developed. They're not officially together or anything, but they've got a whole will they won't they thing going on, and then they bond over stealing her money. It is a very convenient thing for her to drop it, but if you think about it, it is safer for her to keep it on her person than have
Yeah.
it hidden anywhere. And so whether it was like that or somewhere else, I think it's a perfectly reasonable way to show it. And also, beyond that, because I did wonder, why is she going to this random not trailer park, but she's not exactly staying at the Ritz, and
Yeah.
she's obviously going there because she thinks it's the safest place to hide because it's outside of her world. But she is out of her depth at this point
Hmm.
because, for example, her whole story about being from New Orleans, her accent is obviously. Rosamund Pike is a very talented British actress who's doing a great American accent. If she wanted to do a convincing Nola accent, she would have. She
Yeah.
doesn't. She gets her facts wrong. She says things about Shark, and the girl calls her out on it. So even before she drops the money, before she drops the ball, literally, she is dropping the ball. And I do think it is a satisfying part of the story to see that she planned everything perfectly and did it up until this point. But now she's kind of too smart for her own good. And
Yeah.
I think the dropping the money just kind of represents that, is that things, you can't plan for everything, and you couldn't plan for meeting these people and stuff. But it was, I think to your point, it was a bit silly for her to get too close to these people.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think. I mean, I don't know where I would hide the money. I think having it on your person is probably the safest thing. Because to be honest, in a place like that, like these motels and stuff, people often get their rooms like broken into,
Yeah.
turned upside down, and all of that. So I guess, yeah, she thought she had a sense of control there, and obviously just fucked up when she dropped it. But that's again, it's one of those scenes where you just think like, I shouldn't want the best for this woman. She is messed up in the head, and yet when she is so close to checking out, she's cleaned the room, and obviously they come in, and you just could see like when they close the door and stuff, and you're like, oh, they're gonna do it. And every time I'm every time I'm like,
Are they
maybe
gonna find it
yeah,
this
yeah,
time?
but of course they do, and it's like, yeah, I mean, of course that was gonna happen.
I felt the first time, even though you know that she's a bad person, you do want her to get away with it, so to
Yeah.
a point. But then on rewatches, I don't know, maybe it depends on the mood that I'm in, but I feel like every time I go in, I'm seeing it differently. Like sometimes, like, yeah, she's gonna get what's coming for her. Another time, I'm like, oh no, because
Yeah.
they're not likable either. One of my favorite lines is when after they take the money and they said, "Oh, there are much worse people than us." Like, that's
Yeah.
like, you're lucky we didn't murder
Yeah,
you.
I think they tell her to be careful. Yeah, be careful in future. There are much worse people out there, or something like that. And it's like it's almost kind of weirdly caring in a way to be like, oh, we've left you alone, but like, shame on you, sort of thing. Like,
So some of the, I said, sort of background stories that I found interesting were, I mentioned that the macro economy in the US, but that is very much represented through their marriage, but also specifically the town. So this, and there's more details on this in the book. So the town in Missouri, which used to be an affluent middle class town, but the big thing is that the mall, which apparently employed about 4,000 people, the one where the police go and investigate to find out about the gun, and the guy says, "Oh, this woman bought the gun," but you
yeah,
see them go into it. It looks like it's from The Last of Us. There's all these drug dealers and squatters and everything, and there is that town because they live in a McMansion, which is this big. Obviously, they make it look really ominous and stuff, but
mm,
it's meant to be a nice house. But it's in a development, which is one of those that they show in The Big Short, which they built all these nice houses and then everyone defaulted and they all got repossessed.
right,
And they have lots of homeless people, and that's why he blames them. And you've got the unemployment, and obviously the unemployment affects them as well. But it does also show how the difference between poor people during 2008, middle class people and the rich people. The poor rich people had to sell their brownstone in New York and
yeah,
relocate to a mansion in Missouri where they got to buy a bar and plot. And this is the other thing. Her whole plan is a very rich person privilege thing where most people are out there trying to make money or survive. She has all this time on her hands
yeah,
to do this because despite them having financial trouble, they're still not on the street. They're still not running out of the lights aren't going off or anything.
yeah. That's
Whereas you
true.
see the people in the town, the homeless people, or the hillbillies who steal her money. Those people have real problems.
Yeah.
And
Well, if Ben Affleck has money to buy a PlayStation games, and laptop for laptoping that he's obviously not using, and endless amounts of takeaway, then yeah, they're still doing
they're doing
okay.
all right. And then the other one, which we'll probably talk about more in the characters, but I do find the whole story of the amazing Amy and her upbringing and her life and her view on life because of it is quite fascinating because I think they address enough of it in the film to explain it, but you could have a whole movie just about that.
Yeah. No, it is definitely. Well, also not just the stories itself, but obviously what the implication of this whole amazing Amy thing for the relationship that she has with her parents, and even the way that they are at like the press conferences and stuff. Like they're just very used to how to communicate in front of cameras, and it's all again. It is. I don't think it's means that she should have turned out to be this psycho that she is. But obviously, a lot of it does start to make a lot of sense, even in how she is able to like perform
Yeah.
and put the stuff together and build a story and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, everything is very performative. My last point on this, was there a more, obviously look at the Amazing Amy, look at their relationship, what happened, the circumstances. Was there a more interesting story for their relationship to go, or was this the perfect direction for it to go? What would have happened if Amy wasn't insane, I guess, is kind of what I'm asking.
I think this was the perfect direction.
Yeah, I think so too. I think
Otherwise it's not interesting.
maybe it's just one of those where it gets worse and one of them does one thing that's bad, but because the other one is not perfect, you kind of understand it. I think the fact that she went so far, she didn't even, okay, is what she did worse than murdering him? I guess not quite, but it's the second worst thing.
Yeah.
She went so far in the crazy direction that nothing, however bad he was, however bad he was, it was never going to be justifiable for her to do what she did.
No, not at all.
All right, so we've talked a lot about Amy and Nick, so we'll take a little break from them for a few minutes and talk about some of the secondary characters. So you mentioned that you wanted to talk about, so if you want to take the lead on talking about the detective / the cop that she works with.
When you first see the detective, obviously that she's seemingly and quite rightly suspicious of Ben Affleck, and I think it comes across as quite a no bullshit kind of woman, which is great, but not, I wouldn't say very likable. I think the more that I watch the film, the more I appreciate that detective, because I'm like, you're doing a good job, or you're trying to do a good job anyway. That I don't think they actually do in the end, but yeah, I think it was really well cast. I don't know who the actress is, but I appreciated like the character, I think.
Yeah, and I think I agree 100%, and I think an important part of having that impression of her is the officer who works with her, because he is straight up doesn't like him from the beginning, thinks he's the murderer, and even at the end it's like, come on man, just be happy that your wife is back. He's very one-dimensional.
Yeah.
He's very much has one train of thought and he sticks with it, whereas she is initially nice, but then she's suspicious, but then when all the Amy stuff, even before she comes back, she is a bit skeptical about him. She arrests him because there's so much evidence, but you can see that she is willing to hear it out, and then obviously at the end she does ask those questions in an awkward position, but it is a little too late.
I do like feel like she's obviously suspicious of the right people at the right time. So when she's suspicious of Ben Affleck and she says something like, oh, I don't know if it's when she's doing the first interrogation, but it's basically when he hasn't called Amy's parents yet, and there's just this very real moment where she's like, well, what are you, go call them, and he's like, now, and she's like, well, yes, like what, and it's like, yeah, obviously that's what your reaction would be, like, why is he sat around? And then the thing about like, I can't remember, it's something to do with him sleeping with the student, and she's the red pants in the office, and I think she makes maybe that's the sister who makes this comment about like, oh, you're just sleeping with someone who doesn't know where they've left their pants or something, and it's just like, it is funny, obviously it's attacking his character, but like quite rightly. And then again, the detective at the end, when she's asking Amy about the box cutter and stuff, I wanted more of her, I think, doing those things.
Yeah, she's great.
Yeah.
Other secondary characters, Neil Patrick Harris as Desi Collins. One fun, to start on a lighter note, one fun thing I read online is obviously in How I Met Your Mother, one of Barney's many theories is the hot crazy scale, and the hotter a woman is, the crazier she is, and the irony that he gets is that he very much falls for that, because he goes for this very attractive woman who is absolutely batshit crazy, and he gets his throat slit. Also, fun fact, that was the first time, but now twice Neil Patrick Harris has died in a movie from getting his throat slit. The second time was in the new Matrix that came out a couple years ago. His character dies. It's technically virtual in it, but it's still him having the exact same death.
Wow.
So people have drawn that. So here's my main question on him. So at the time he was in How I Met Your Mother, which I was, maybe I had finished then. It was around that. He was very much Barney at that time. And I was a big fan of the show at the time. And I think it has to be one or the other. Is he a terrible casting, or is he perfect for this character?
When you say one or the other, so I I kind of think terrible. Basically, I think he plays the role really well, but I think because he has been Barney, I personally couldn't shake it. And I don't know if that's like more of a me thing. I think he plays it well, but I don't like him in the role, which is confusing to say.
I think, yeah, I think I agree. I think you're right. He does everything he can, but it feels like he's Barney in disguise the whole time. Even in the way because it's. I'm not saying that he's doing something completely different, and I'm just still seeing Barney like sometimes you'll have with an actor, but um, even you say when he's being douchey, it's like he's channeling Barney energy, but he's just trying to filter out the humor. And I don't think it's not as though he's not being serious or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think I think the more you watch it, and you understand the character and how weird he is meant to be and messed up, and so he kind of works this weird way. But the first time you watch it, it's a complete what?
Yeah.
What is this person doing? How am I? Yeah. So we're agreeing that he's a terrible casting.
Yeah.
He's very good at playing the unbearable douche, but yeah, it's strange.
And also, like, I don't know if hopeless romantic is the right word, but like when they're talking about their plans, I think they're having dinner together or something, and she's like, "Oh, I'd love to go back to, we should go back to Greece at some point," and he's like, "Octopus and Scrabble," like, like nobody talks like that, and it's so like he's got this image of what their runaway life is going to be together. It's so far from what she has planned that it's just like, how can you be so smart and talk about all this, like, whatever it is that they talk about, novels and opera and all this classical music and stuff, and yet just be so stupid when it comes to what's actually happening in front of you.
Yeah, the line that she says to him when she's flattering him is, "Desi, you can discuss 18th century symphony, 19th century impressionist, quote Proust in French. Nick's idea of culture was a reality TV marathon in one hand down his boxers and his other around the family-sized block of Velveeta."
Yeah, I felt personally attacked by the reality TV marathon. I mean, I'm a cultured girly, but I like my reality.
Yeah, listen, we know how to have fun. That their thing doesn't sound fun.
No.
But yeah, I think this is why I'm torn, because what we're talking about there, he epitomizes that. He is exactly that douchey guy who, and the important thing about his character is, you have no problem. Obviously, the way he dies is horrific, but if anything, you feel worse for yourselves having just watched him die than you feel for him of having his throat cut, right?
Yeah.
So, bad casting, but he did the best that he could as Neil Patrick Harris could have.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, because in the recasting, I've had a couple of thoughts on people who could play him, and I think the thing I find interesting about the recasting is identifying the things that made a character so good. Obviously, in this case, we agree that Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike are amazing, and it's going to be very hard to recast them. And we can say, because they need to do, like I was saying with Ben Affleck, he needs to be able to do the cool, handsome guy, but also the slob. And I think here is a case where maybe we could improve on it by finding someone that can seem douchey, but also seem realistic and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to finish up on Neil Patrick Harris, he became famous as Doogie Howser, the kid doctor. Don't know if you're ever aware of that.
No.
That was his right. So he was a child star playing basically a super smart kid who was a doctor, even though he was 12 or 13 years old. That was his big thing. Then everyone knew who he was. It was before our time, but he was very famous. And then he was in the Harold and Kumar movies playing himself.
Oh, yeah.
So very... kind of not himself, but because he played himself as straight, and obviously he came out later as gay, but a very kind of even douche Barney Stinson without any of the charm was kind of what they were going for. Very womanizing, doing drugs and stuff like that. Then he did Barney Stinson, which was a very particular role that he made his own, and obviously he was great at doing that. But my point here is that it's not like he has a long list of serious acting credits, and he has not gone on to do that after Gone Girl. So he's appeared in this and that, but the fact is he very much plays himself or a version of himself. So he's a sort of person who goes around, who's done stuff, but he does very much play a particular type of role. So either a caricature of himself or a particular type. So not a huge surprise, and obviously we're not alone in thinking this, because it's not as though the roles came flooding in. Having said that, and this is a good segue to Tyler Perry. So this character was initially it was written as an Alec Baldwin type character, which I can see, but they obviously went in a different direction. Do you know what Tyler Perry's famous for?
No.
So Tyler Perry is famous for these Medea movies, which he writes, produces, where he plays all of the characters, and it's these black comedies where he plays old, overweight black grandmas, and he plays a bunch of Medea. That's what Medea's character is. But he
Right.
will play multiple characters in the movie, and they are hugely successful in that particular niche. But they're considered pretty bad by any person outside of that community, let's say. They
Yeah.
are. I've watched a couple for work, and they are. I think they're terrible.
I'm
So
just imagining, is it The Nutty Professor where
it's
it's
that
all
sort
like
of.
Eddie
It's that
Murphy?
sort of thing.
Oh God.
I don't know if that came before Medea or vice versa of Eddie Murphy trying to do that, but it's exactly that movie. Some people love it. Good for them. He is fabulously rich because most of those movies he now has his own production studio in near Atlanta. So he's done very the point. My point of all this is the fact that he has lots of acting credits. He's fabulously rich. He only has up until this point, and including this, he only has 3 roles that were where he was just an actor. So everything else he did was stuff that he wrote, that he directed, that he produced. The only 2 things before this were a 2009 movie called Alex Cross, which I haven't seen, that he got a Razzie nomination for Worst Actor for, and he had a small role in a 2009 Star Trek movie. So this is basically his second real role in a drama movie, and obviously there's hints of humor, but it's a straight role,
Yeah.
and I think he's great.
He is really good in it. Yeah. I like I said, I didn't know who he was before, but like I very much remember him for this role personally, and think he's great in it.
Yeah, I think most non-black people will mostly know him for this. I'm sure they think it's quite funny that he's in this, but he's really good. I think it's a shame that he hasn't been in more stuff because
Yeah.
he is really good in this. It's funny to think that it was written as a different type of character because he brings his own sort of because he's meant to be playing a pretty trashy lawyer, successful, but the sort of people who defends the Menendez brother or
Yeah.
O.J. Simpson type of person. Because I think when he's on the interview before he hires him, it says defender of murder husbands type of thing. But he's a very interesting part of the whole media frenzy part of the story.
Yeah. Yeah. The jelly bean scene where he's like training basically Ben Affleck not to look a certain way, look smug or annoying or anything like that. And every time Ben Affleck says something that's like, yeah, exactly, that he doesn't agree with, he just chucks a jelly bean at him or a gummy bear, whatever it is. And it's very funny.
I think, obviously, it's funny in a very visual, visceral way. But I think what's fun about it is that the whole movie, because at this point we know that he's actually innocent. And everyone, like, I think specifically his sister, Margot, who is in that scene as well, she basically, this is what people like her have been, and us as an audience have been wanting to do the whole movie. I mean, someone needed to throw a jelly bean in his head and tell him, hey, don't smile, don't take selfies, don't say this,
Yeah.
don't fuck your mistress
Yeah.
while you're under suspicion of murder.
Yeah.
I think that's why, obviously, it's funny, but it is quite cathartic to have someone finally put him in his place. And that's why that character is so important, is because he is someone with a position of authority over him, whereas no one else has had that. And actually, yeah, he's the only person, even the police. Ben Affleck doesn't respect the police. He doesn't respect his wife. He loves his sister, but he doesn't take her. He fucks his mistress in her house while with all the media around. The only person he does actually listen to is Tyler Perry's character.
Yeah.
Speaking of Nick Dunn, let's talk about him. So when we talk about Amy, there's a lot of other actors that were considered for her, but I haven't seen much about other. I'm sure others were. It's not as though he was attached from the beginning. But Ben Affleck, as we said before, is just perfect for this role.
Yeah, he is. I mean, he is very smug looking and I mean, he's a handsome guy and he can be very charismatic and stuff, but I do feel like he plays that like unlikable, flawed, alcoholic, well, not alcoholic, but like mess of a husband, cheating, like all of that really well. Obviously, there are probably a lot of guys that can play it really well, but I think he's so well cast because he can, you mentioned it earlier, but like he can do both sides, like the whole charming side and then also the like the side that you want to throw gummy bears at.
Yeah, I've got just a background on him. Obviously, everyone knew who he was before this. He was a huge star. He came up in smaller roles in Dazed and Confused, Good Will Hunting, which he co-wrote with Matt Damon, and ironically, one of his first movies was called Chasing Amy.
Oh wow.
Which is, a lot of people have noted as just a fun little thing. No link, no relation. But then he became a bona fide movie star with Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Daredevil. And then in the 10 years before this, he was in and directed The Town and then Argo, which I think Argo is probably arguably his best movie purely from a quality point of view. And then to me, Gone Girl comes at the tail end of his take me seriously part of my career. I feel like he did the Armageddon, Pearl Harbor, Daredevil, which is kind of rock bottom. Well, no, it wasn't. Giggly was with Jennifer Lopez.
I didn't see that.
I haven't seen it, but I've heard a lot about it, and it's just considered one of the worst movies of all time. And I think that was the thing because I've seen some very interesting interviews with Matt Damon because they came up together. They're both A-list stars, taken super seriously, and obviously partly it's their personality. But Matt Damon is not an unattractive man at all. But he said Ben Affleck because he just has that movie star look. And again, he probably his life is different than Matt Damon's, but he's been so much more under the spotlight with the paparazzi and everything. Mm-hmm. So he had much more of this need to prove himself as I'm a serious filmmaker and actor and stuff. But again, this is why he's perfect for this role because this man that is under the microscope and is misunderstood doesn't always help himself. Yeah. Because Ben Affleck, do you know about his tattoo?
No.
Ben Affleck has a giant dragon tattoo. Like, it's a full back tattoo. I'm going to have to show you a picture and I'll put it up on screen for our viewers. So he doesn't help himself. And he was just perfect for Nick Dunn. I actually have the perfect culmination of this point. Apparently, David Fincher, when he chooses cast people, obviously he's David Fincher, he can have whoever he wants, like Quentin Tarantino, but he goes online and just kind of Google images people, and there was this very particular smile that Ben Affleck has, whether it's on red carpets or paparazzi and stuff, and it was that kind of, this is the guy to do the smile, because obviously the smile scene is in the book, and the smile is kind of a linchpin of the story in terms of this is why everyone believed that he had murdered her, including us, and it's why even when you know that he didn't do it, you get that everyone think he's guilty. And David Fincher said this is the perfect guy to do that smile because if it was too charming, it wouldn't work. If it wasn't charming enough, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
But yeah, so phenomenal casting. Apparently some people that were considered for the role were Brad Pitt. I think I can't, this is what I was saying before. I can't imagine, I'm sure he would have managed to pull it off because obviously I love Brad Pitt. But seeing him drinking beer, playing video games is just not something that you imagine Brad Pitt doing. He's almost too pretty for that. And then John Hamm, I could see.
Yeah, that one I can believe.
Seth Rogen, we love Seth Rogen, but if anything, that's where he wouldn't have been able to pull off. Obviously, he's funny and stuff, but I don't think you would have bought Amy character falling for him in the same way that she falls for Ben Affleck.
He would have to be very different. Yeah. Yeah.
And then Ryan Reynolds, which, what do you think?
Well, we haven't officially gone to who I would have had, and he wasn't my number one pick, but he is one of the people that came to mind for me.
For the recast.
Yeah.
I think now because he's probably a very similar age as Ben Affleck, so I think now he's probably a bit old, but I think visually he has the look, but I think he would struggle to, because Ben Affleck's character is never silly. He can be funny, but in a dark way. But I feel like Ryan Reynolds, I just can't imagine Ryan Reynolds not being Ryan Reynolds in this movie.
Well, have you ever seen the Amityville horror movie that he was in? Because he's not silly at all in that.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, it's chilling. It's not a good film, but he's chilling in it.
So we've talked a lot about different aspects of his personality and story and stuff. But how do we feel about him at the end? Once he's gone through all of this, and he's obviously decided to stay with her. Yeah, how do we feel about that final decision?
I still don't like him, obviously, but I feel bad for him, and a little frightened, I guess. The sleeping separately and like cradling the cat in like the other room and stuff. Like, yeah, obviously feel bad for him.
Because I like for preparation for these, going on Rotten Tomatoes and seeing more. I just look at the most recent reviews. And a lot of times, either people watching it for the first time or rewatched it and haven't left a review. And mostly for this, they're glowing. But the only thing that would come up in the negative ones were saying that the end doesn't make sense to them. And I guess we didn't actually talk about this in the story, so now is a good time. Obviously, again, the whole story is crazy. But putting that aside, she's done what she's done. People say no way that he would ever go back to her and stay with her. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I didn't think staying. I don't know how long they've been together at the end.
It's a few weeks, I think 6-7 weeks.
Yeah, so I don't feel like that's unbelievable at all. Like, I think it makes sense that that he would do that and then probably leave her. Wait, at the end she's supposed to still be pregnant.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I guess
And
that's the reason why, isn't
Yeah.
it? I mean, that's the only reason. Otherwise, if she wasn't pregnant, he would have probably left even a couple of
Yes.
weeks before that, maybe.
But Margot makes the point, and he doesn't disagree, that you're really going to stay with her for 18 years now to raise this kid, and he sort of says, yeah.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that.
So I think it's perfectly plausible for a movie. So I think anyone to say they didn't enjoy the movie of that is kind of missing the point. But the big thing that when I was thinking about it, honestly, from the reviews, is the fact that he's been through hell the last couple of months. Obviously, mostly being suspected of murder, but it is all because of her. And I think again, this isn't healthy, but he's kind of in an impossible situation. I think that he probably is too scared to go back to being her enemy. Sort of by keeping her close and being under her thumb and doing what she wants and being this perfect husband, it's easier and safer to do that than it is to basically, do the brave thing and call her out. Because if he separated from her, he would probably have to explain why he's doing it. He would probably have to try and expose her for what she did, and then it would go to court and then custody battles and everything. And we know he's a lazy guy at this point, so I think he just kind of sees this as the easy out, which I don't defend, but I think that does make some sense of his character.
Yeah, I guess so.
Because their whole dynamic is about passive control. Mm-hmm. Because she, they started off fine. But then what happened is that she wanted the marriage to work, and he realized she was never going to leave him. So he basically said, well, I'm going to be a slob and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to use your money and just, I'm going to go to the bar and drink every day. And you're not. And he's right. Because she doesn't want to do anything about it. And then she takes the control with the movie. And then she gets him back. And then she gets him back under the control of, you're now my husband. She kind of wins at the end.
Yeah.
One final anecdote about Ben Affleck, and then we'll move on to Amy, is the New York Yankees cap. There's that scene when he's walking through the airport, and apparently, because they live in New York, and I guess he's flying to New York, David Fincher really wanted him to wear a Yankees cap, but as a huge Boston guy and a Red Sox fan, Ben Affleck refused to do that. The legend is that they shut down shooting for 4 days because they were fighting over this. Which seems crazy, and the actress who plays Margot has come out and said, I do not remember there being a shutdown for days on end. They eventually compromised and he wore a Mets cap. Moving on to Amy, arguably the most interesting character. As a woman, what are your thoughts on... Let's just start with the character and then we'll talk about Rosamund Pike. But what is your thought on the character of Amy?
So I find she's obviously interesting to watch. I don't like her at any point. I think she's like an intellectual snob who like measures people against their intelligence, or I don't know. I feel like she, as part of the charm, I guess, of her and Ben Affleck getting together, like even the things that she likes about them, it doesn't feel organic or natural or genuine. I think everything just feels very like staged with her and very much a pretense. So although I find her interesting to watch, I don't think she's a very likable character at all. But I do think she's obviously very smart and then calculated and manipulative and all of that good stuff that makes for a twisty taily plot. But yeah, I don't like her.
I think the smart thing is super important because she's obviously smart, but I think like so many characters in movies and some in real life, she falls into that category of is smart but thinks that she's smarter than she is, as we've talked about in the plot about how she didn't think it all the way through. Obviously, you don't expect your partner to become someone different when you marry them or move and stuff. But it does seem quite naive for her to have just thought that he's going to stay this particular way or to be completely shocked that things were going to change.
Yeah. And the thing, like, there was a scene, I think, where he's getting ready to go out. Obviously, he's going to meet his mistress, but he's saying, that he's going to the bar to meet his old, like, buddies from school or whatever. And she's trying to kind of invite herself along. And that's where she starts saying, I think it's time we have a baby. And obviously it's just like so fucked up, but also obviously in that moment you do feel as a woman, I guess, like, oh, he was obviously cheating at this point, and like, how sad is this for her? And she's obviously uprooted her life and had to move there for him, and now she's not interesting to him and all that stuff. So like from a woman's standpoint, obviously you do feel for her there, but yeah, I just feel like she's quite a I don't think annoying is the right word, but not a likable character.
So yes, I think a very important thing, I totally agree, but I think a super important thing I realized about her is she doesn't like anybody either. I was reading this thing that there's this big argument about whether she's basically a feminist or an anti-feminist, and the author of the book said that this is something that she grappled with about people criticizing her, but she says, and I agree, that it's kind of the ultimate feminist thing to just show that a woman can be just as cruel and crazy and manipulative as men have been portrayed as being. But and then some people have said that she's the ultimate. Elliot Dunn is the only fictional character I think can be accurately described as simultaneously misogynist and misandrist, which I found out misandrist means sexist against men. I didn't know that word. So I agree, but I think that makes you a misanthrope, which means that you hate everyone. Because let's go through the characters. Maybe she doesn't hate them. She doesn't like her parents because of what they did to him. She always doesn't like any of her ex-partners because they either left her, so she framed them of rape, or, Desi she obviously doesn't respect. I think she likes Nick at first, even there she makes fun of him not knowing how to pronounce quinoa or stuff like that. Yeah. But I think that's all gentle. But as soon as he's the person that I think he's the only person that she likes a little bit for a little while, because she doesn't like his family or friends. She doesn't like the neighbors. She doesn't like the people that she meet, the hillbillies. As soon as they say something slightly offensive, she spits in their drink. So I think she genuinely hates everyone.
Yeah.
Which I don't think it's really possible to like for us as viewers to like someone that clearly wouldn't like us.
Well, she's also the feminist thing is quite funny because even though the speech, I think the monologue is really good, where she's talking about all the things that she tried to be for him, like the cool, she talks about the cool girl thing. That whole thing of describing women, I think there's a bit of like her driving past a car and the woman that's in that car is like kind of hipster looking with like thick rimmed glasses and tattoos, and she's like, okay, so her, she's trying to impress a guy who's probably into vinyls and something else, and then there's like the Hooters kind of comment that she makes. All of that is obviously extremely judgmental and not very feminist at all, because she's basically implying that like women can't have their own style, characteristics, passions, all of that stuff, and it always has to be about the guy that they're impressing, when actually that's just her reality, and a lot of women do have their own hobbies, fashions, music, all of that sort of stuff. I get the point she's trying to make, but it is very, I think, offensive to women.
I don't think anyone would ever argue that character thinks that she's a feminist. I think it's whether she represents feminism in the fact that she's rebelling against the patriarchy and stuff like that, which, it's nuanced. She's not even if she's not doing it in the right way, so it's kind of a moot point. But yeah, she's just an interesting person for people to use as an example. And the debate she brings up is basically, okay, well, if someone treats you like shit, what should you do to fight against it? And which I think is the core of this movie, is she should have just left him.
Mm-hmm.
But she doesn't, because of the whole Amazing Amy thing, and that and this is where she does represent. She represents feminist ideas of fighting against this image that you need to be the cool girl all the time, and that she's rebelling against that. And I think that's why feminists sort of do like certain parts of what she does. But yeah, so let's talk about the Amazing Amy thing. That she basically thinks that despite what she says, she is still aspiring to be Amazing Amy, isn't she?
I'm not sure. I feel like in all the Amazing Amy stories, there's like obviously a whole, like she had a big sense of control over like what happened in those regards. And I guess this one is like the worst thing I feel that could happen to her is that she's forgotten, or that she blends into the background, or like basically it's just like a very nothingy kind of end. So like with the ex-boyfriend who maybe lost interest in her, she had to then be the star of the show again and obviously like frame him for rape. And then this whole situation, like Nick is losing interest and obviously is getting his kicks somewhere else, and she refuses to go down that way. I'm not saying it's like the Amazing Amy, like that would be the story, but I think there's an element of like she would much rather blow it all up in that regard and still be the star kind of thing, and still have all the attention, than have somebody make that decision for her, or even for her to just walk away from it. It's like just so anticlimactic, I guess. But yeah, that's kind of how I thought about it.
Yeah, I agree. I think if two people just drift apart, like if two people just drift apart, like her and Nick obviously did, and it is definitely portrayed that he's more to blame at that point because she's still trying. But the fact is, it's just seen as a mutual failing, and she clearly would rather, she would rather be murdered.
Mm.
She literally, at that, her initial plan is she would rather die than be seen as basically having a failed marriage, and she would rather frame her husband than all of that. So yeah, I think it's both. It's dramatic. It's making her the main character, like you say, but it is also the not being seen as a failure because I think she's just tired of that happening,
Mm-hmm.
which is just insane.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Rosamund Pike. Apparently, so this is one of those books where it was making the rounds even before the book was published. This happened with Casino as well. Obviously, in that case, they'd also made Goodfellas based on the same guy. But she had a reputation as a very good author, and before Gone Girl came out, the manuscript was circulating around Hollywood, and apparently Reese Witherspoon got her hands on it and wanting to play Amy.
Oh.
Oh, is indeed. But she had a meeting with David Fincher and very quickly realized that she wasn't right for it.
Mm-hmm.
Other people who were considered, so obviously Reese Witherspoon, you say no.
No.
So I'm going to rattle off some names. You give me a yes, no, or maybe. Okay? Charlize Theron.
Yes.
Okay.
I think.
Natalie Portman.
Yeah.
Emily Blunt.
Yes.
Olivia Wilde.
Yeah.
Heather Graham.
No.
And Jessica Chastain.
Yes.
I think it's such a hard character to play. I think some of because obviously Rosamund Pike I think is beautiful.
Yeah.
I think she's very unique in terms of where she falls on like the type of beauty she has. And obviously she's referred to as being very attractive throughout, but I don't think it's a huge in your face like bombshell either, which is where I think a Charlize Theron would be too, or like in the recasting Margot Robbie came up, but I think that's too. I think Charlize Theron and Margot Robbie, they don't look the same, but they're very much in that bombshell type of thing, and so she needs to be able to play the attractive snob, as you say, but then also be the trashy burger eating, and then also just pull off being a psycho and stuff.
Yeah.
Which, yeah.
I think I agree. Margot Robbie couldn't do it, but I feel like Charlize Theron. There's a way of like. Obviously, her face is still quite striking, but I think there's a way of dressing her down a little bit more for the role.
I mean, she won an Oscar for Monster, where she plays someone that doesn't look anything like her. So yeah, that's fair.
Whereas I just don't see it for Margot Robbie at all, and certainly not Reese Witherspoon.
Yeah, no, that would not have worked at all. That's the strangest of all of them.
Yeah.
But Reese Witherspoon did produce the movie, so she was involved. Rosamund Pike's background. So this is interesting. She's British. Started her career in theater straight out of college. And her first role was a Bond girl in 2002. She played the main love interest of Pierce Brosnan in Die Another Day. I think I'd seen it before this, and she was just another Bond girl. And then I think I rewatched it after this and was like, oh, I didn't know that she was in this. And she's obviously beautiful in that because she was a Bond girl. But I think she looks better. I think she suits the age that she is in Gone Girl, which is another thing actually. When he was casting her, David Fincher liked that Rosamund Pike's age was unclear because I think she's got, and I mean this in a good way, a mature face, whereas a lot of actresses in their late 20s or 30s can still, and this is true for men as well, they can still look, because obviously looking younger than you are is usually a good thing in Hollywood.
Yeah.
But I don't think that she really does. But so she could easily be 29 or 41. Yeah. She was actually 35. But I think the important thing for whoever plays that character is to kind of have that ambiguous look. So she started her career in theater, James Bond. She was in a bunch of other films, usually either British films or she had secondary roles, but then her big break was with Gone Girl, where she was nominated for an Oscar. And she's worked since consistently, but she hasn't had, a lot of people have said that they kind of, after this, they expected her to go on and, be an absolute star, and she hasn't really done that. The two big things that she's famous for nowadays beyond this are Saltburn, obviously, which to me was like, oh, she's back, she's doing something awesome. And then she's also in The Wheel of Time, which is one of those fantasy shows on Amazon. She's got a big role in that.
But she was also, wasn't she the one that was in I Care a Lot?
Yes, so she was in I Care a Lot, but that's not a very well-known film.
No,
so
I guess that's one just that we both really liked, and she was amazing in that as well.
She's very much, it's different from this, but it's very much harnessing the same sort of energy. So Most people out there won't have watched it. I care a lot. I think it was an Amazon movie, so it should still be on there. Definitely go check that. Completely different story, but yeah, mind fuck. It's
Yeah.
also got Peter Dinklage and Eliza Gonzalez in it. Very, very good.
Yeah.
Yeah, one. I wouldn't say it's a theme, but one thing I do find interesting is the use of food. Is how one of the first things she does when she leaves is she starts eating burgers and she eats all the fast food. Apparently, Rosamund Pike gained and lost 13 pounds 3 times to play the character at different points in her life.
Oof.
So probably when she was younger, older, when she's on the run, and then when she kills Desi. Feels like they could have done that so they filmed everything in one go when
Yeah.
she was skinny and then. But she is. You do really notice right before she kills Desi how skinny she is there
Yeah.
compared to before. But it's an interesting use of weight. In her on her list of things to do, there is one that says get fat, start smoking. That's probably the most fun one to do. So now let's do the recasting. So some fun and games. Well, we can chat for fun after about some of the secondary characters because I made some notes. But the main two we're going to focus on are recasting Amy and Nick. I'll tell you 4 people that I considered for each role and then who I chose. And then you will tell me similar. And at the end, we'll put up a poll on our Amy-Nick duo and which one people prefer. Another twist is I asked ChatGPT who they thought should do it. So we'll actually put ChatGPT as like a third one. I don't think they'll win because their choices are not good. So we'll start with Nick. So people who I've considered but didn't choose. Theo James.
Yes.
Michael B. Jordan.
Oh.
Donald Glover.
Mm-hmm.
John Krasinski. And then the person that I've gone with is John David Washington. So the main guy from Tenet.
Oh, okay.
Denzel's son.
Oh, that's a good one, actually. Yeah.
Again, like we talked about, it needs to be someone that can be the two scenes I'm imagining them. The 3 scenes is the meeting scene, the video game scene, and then also the smiling in front of the sign scene. To me, those are the 3 types of character, the dimensions that you need to be able to pull off.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't necessarily someone like John Krasinski I liked, but I don't. Yeah, it just didn't seem quite right.
Yeah.
Who are yours?
Okay, I've got a few here. But also one I think is too old. Jake Gyllenhaal is who I had because I think he can do both of the...
He could have been.
Yeah, I feel like he's a bit old, but I feel like he fits the bill on like those different dimensions that we just talked about. Funnily enough, I had Ryan Reynolds because I did think he would be quite good, and obviously I've seen him in things but where he's less silly. Chris Evans I thought was quite an
I
interesting
considered
one.
him.
I know because we've obviously seen him in quite like clean looking roles and like very pure and stuff. I don't know if that's the right word to use, but I could imagine him looking a bit more like downbeaten and kind of disheveled and stuff, and definitely doing like I could see the smug sort of smile thing as well, and then obviously being like incredibly charming at the beginning. And then Daniel Kaluuya was my last suggestion there.
Yeah, I can definitely see him. And who did you pick?
I think well, if we weren't taking the age thing into it, then I do think Jake Gyllenhaal.
Okay, he's your pick.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, when I was thinking about him, because I did consider him, he was one of the ones. Then he wasn't their pick, but he's one of the ones that came up in ChatGPT. But Presumed Innocent, the Apple show we watched. I feel like I feel like if I hadn't seen that, I'd have said, "Oh, Jake Gyllenhaal, he's got a lot of range because he plays a real dipshit, like a douchebag in that." But I guess maybe part of me almost didn't want to see him do that again because even though we enjoyed that show somewhat, I don't like feeling that way about him.
No, and I also think a big problem with that show is I don't remember there being very much on the fairy tale love story building.
No,
like
he was
there
just
wasn't
a dick in that.
Exactly, it was just all the bad side.
But we know he could play the charming guy.
Yeah, so that's why I think it would be less frustrating to watch than when we watched Presumed Innocent.
So for the Amy character, so again, these are the ones that I haven't picked, but I considered: Tessa Thompson, Alicia Vikander, Zoe Kravitz, and I know she comes up in a lot of mine, but she's a great actress. Ashley Park from Emily in Paris. But the one I went with was Megan Fahey.
Oh, she's a very good pick for this. She did not come to mind for me at all.
She's a bit on. I mean, she's the same age as Rosamund Pike was. I think she would have to really like the makeup and the way they dress her. They would really have to make sure she doesn't look girly because she is still quite youthful. But other than that, I like her, and I think her and John David Washington will work quite well together.
Yeah.
Who are your picks?
Top of my list was actually Zoe Kravitz. So
Yeah,
I
I think
think
she'd be
she
great.
would be really good. I'm not passionate about this person, but I feel like she fits the bill. Brie Larson. I
Yeah.
don't want to be like, again, talking about not being feminist. I have a dislike randomly for a few people in this world, and she's one of them,
Yeah.
along with Dakota Johnson, a couple of others. I don't know why. I don't know, that's mean. But anyway, with that aside, I still think she would be very good in this role. And then one person who I had on my list, but I think you'd made the point earlier about Rosamund Pike being so good because there's ambiguity in what age she might actually be. Emma Roberts was someone I thought
Yeah.
could be good when I've seen her in things like American Horror Story and stuff. I feel like I know she does a lot more like goofy stuff outside of that, but I also think she does the like,
She looks too young.
she can do the kind of crazy thing as well, but she does, yeah. Oh, and Scream's a big one where she does that as well, but she just looks a bit too young. I feel like she's going to always, well, for a while, look like she's in her 20s. So yeah, I think Zoe Kravitz is my top pick for that one. Oh, sorry. But the other two people I had and I've crossed out, Emily Blunt and Jennifer Lawrence. So it's funny that you said about Emily Blunt being considered for it.
Yeah. ChatGPT, I think ChatGPT picked Florence Pugh,
Oh yeah.
which obviously we love Florence Pugh, but I just don't think she's right for this role. And then Adam Driver as the man. And I think actually both of them illustrate, I didn't plan this, about the physicality, because not the Amy character ever does anything overly physical, but I think there is something about her not being a small lady either, whereas Florence Pugh is quite short. And conversely, with the Adam Driver, you needed someone that was big enough that they could theoretically be a domestic abuser. I mean, obviously, I know a small man can be, but my point is, for visual purposes, it needs to be someone that you would realistically... Ben Affleck, you see, oh, he could absolutely murder her with his bare hands.
Yeah.
But then I also think it needs to be someone that's not too big.
Which Adam Driver is.
Yeah, which Adam Driver is. So yeah, sorry ChatGPT, but we'll put it up, guys. You can choose either Sonita's pick, which is Jake Gyllenhaal and Zoe Kravitz, Dom's pick, which is Megan Fahy and John David Washington, or ChatGPT's pick, which is Florence Pugh and Adam Driver. I really hope ChatGPT doesn't beat us.
Yeah.
One side note I made is that I think if John David Washington did it, I think Tessa Thompson as his twin could be a good pairing. And they are nearly the same age, unlike the actress who played Margot and Ben Affleck that are almost 10 years apart.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Do you have anyone in mind for the Neil Patrick Harris or the Tyler Perry characters?
I did. I thought, like, let's think of some weirdos. Daniel Radcliffe, Evan Peters, and Barry Keoghan. But then I was like, maybe they're all a bit too weird. But I feel like they could do the like,
I like
classic
those.
kind of, but also the weird, you already know they're a weirdo. They could have been, essentially, this before, like, everything kicked off, we knew that he'd been, like, sending her loads of letters and stuff. So the whole, like, intense thing, whether they're like an actual criminal or not, but yeah.
So I've picked a couple of weirdos as well. Ben Whishaw, Joseph Gordon-Levitt. I know we wouldn't want to see him in that, but I think he would play the innocent side, and it would be shocking to see him then turn out to be this. We've never seen Joseph Gordon-Levitt do creepy, but I think he could do it.
Yeah.
Riz Ahmed.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Jesse Eisenberg. Definitely creepy.
Yeah.
And then this would be taking someone that very much in the upper, Adam Devine. The guy from Pitch Perfect. Like, he'd be, I'm the nice, harmless guy that now I'm actually going to keep you locked into my home.
Yeah.
And then what about Tyler Perry's character?
I have Glenn Powell. Because I thought he could be
good.
I
see that.
Dev Patel. And then I have John Krasinski as part of this, because I think that they are all, like, can do funny, charming, like, I know stuff, whatever it might be, but also could do that, because he's not really, I know he doesn't come across as sleazy, but obviously that someone in that lifestyle could be playing on the wrong side of things, but generally I think comes across as a likable character, and I think those are all in that category.
I like all of those. I went into this direction of taking people who are known for comedy but who would be doing this more straight edge.
Right.
So I picked Ben Schwartz.
Oh yeah.
And Hassan Minhaj.
Oh, he's a good one.
I think this is what Tyler Perry does. That you come in with that funny energy, but you just like keep it in check and you play the straight character. But you can, even with Tyler Perry, you can just feel the undertone. You can feel that he wants to make a joke at any point, but he's like keeping it under control. Let's move on to the dialogue and script. Obviously, we've covered a lot of this, but some of our favorite lines. One detail about the script, which I found very interesting. Gillian Flynn wrote the book, and she wanted to write the script herself. I don't think she had any experience script writing before, but she was a journalist for 15 years, then a writer, so she's a very experienced writer. And she submitted the first script. Normally what happens at this point is it gets taken over by the studio and the director, and they basically say thanks, they give them a writing credit, and then they rewrite the screenplay. But David Fincher agreed to basically work on the script with her, and it seems like they pretty much co-wrote it, but she seems to have gotten, I think she got sole credit. All the scripts I've seen, and I think the nominations, she didn't get an Academy Award nomination, but I think she got a BAFTA Golden Globe. She is credited as the sole one. I think David Fincher was like, you can have it. Everyone knows that I wrote most of this. So yeah, but there are certain lines, including some here, that are taken directly from the book. So it's not like he sprinkled it all. But yeah, so it's very good script and a very good collaboration between the two of them. Which ones have you got?
The whole monologue of her both explaining, like, Rosamund Pike, sorry, in the car, where she's talking about, like, crime scene, how it carried out, but also describing all the things that she tried to be for him, and then, you know, how it ended up turning into him not appreciating her, and she's like, he actually expected me to love him unconditionally, and all of that stuff. Like, that whole bit, I think, is really good. The cool girl monologue where she's talking about, you know, for him I was willing to try, and then she says, you know, I wax stripped my pussy raw, which is just so
that's the line that always sticks to my head.
Drank canned beer, blew him semi-regularly is what she says, and then basically that whole bit, and then I think then she leads on to describing, like, the fact that he expected her to love him unconditionally, and obviously that was not the case, as it shouldn't be, and then describing the crime scene and everything, or not crime scene, but the plan. And then I think that one of my favorites is actually just very simply when she returns to him and she's covered in blood, and he just says, "You fucking bitch," in her ear.
What we were all thinking.
Yeah. Tyler Perry, I've got two of his. So one is when he's throwing gummy bears at Ben Affleck, and he says, "Every time you look smug, annoyed, tense, I'm going to hit you with a gummy bear." And then he also says, "You two are the most fucked up people I've ever known, and I specialize in fucked up."
Yeah, I had that one too.
Which I just think is absolutely true and so funny. And then I really like him, the Nick narration at the beginning. I picture cracking her lovely skull. I think it's just like very crazy and visual and everything, but
it's just the perfect opener for this movie.
Yeah, but it just makes a lot of sense. So those are my faves. What are some of yours?
So I like this is just a funny line, and get early on when they're talking about the wood with the sister, and she says, "Go home, fuck her brains out, then smack her with your penis. Here's some wood for you, bitch." Sets the mood about the kind of movie that we're going to be watching and the kind of script. Then, as I said, the world-class vagina is funny. Also, in the same vein as the cool girl, I think this is when she's talking about how cute they were. Sometimes I want to punch us in the face, we're so cute.
Oh, yeah.
And just how she just has this love. On the one hand, she makes fun of everyone else, but on the other hand, she clearly thrives on the idea that they are actually this amazing couple. Mm-hmm. And I do think this is where it can, hopefully people aren't going to take away from this. They need to frame their partner for murder. But it is this, all these, like the cool girl, the idea of mocking other people, but them being them. We're watching Sex and the City at the moment, and I feel like there's a lot of that. I mean, pretty much every episode is the four of them making fun of, people do this, and then each one of them encounters that situation in their dating life. And I feel like there's a bit of that here, how she starts off, because you said, this very snobbish, no one else knows how to do a relationship, no one else loves each other like me and my man, we have great sex, we go out, we're fun and all of this. And it's like, well, when shit happened to you, look what happened to you. And I think that is a big theme. But that's why I just think sometimes I want to punch us in the face, we're so cute, just kind of summarize all that really well. This, again, it's a simple simple line, it would be fine without, but it just sums up his character. What's the laptop for? Laptopping. Another one I really like is, this is between Margot and Nick, about the Emily Ratajkowski. How do you even meet her? She was one of my students. I thought writers hated cliches. And he just says, I'm not a writer anymore. And then another one, which I think is also a great summary of the film and the characters, Amy saying he needs to learn, grown-ups work for things, grown-ups pay, grown-ups suffer consequences. And this is something that I can relate to, and ironically it reminded me of there's this episode in How I Met Your Mother where Lily because a teacher starts teaching lessons to other adults by taking things away, and it turns out she's done this to all the characters at a different point, where indirectly she's punished them for things, and she just says, no, people need to be punished for doing bad things. And the characters explains that you can't behave like this as a grown-up of just punishing people passive aggressively. But there was always a part of us that is, I followed the rules, and if other people don't follow the rules, they need to be punished. And that is part of her her motivation is, the reason why she doesn't just murder him is because she wants to punish him, and she wants him to suffer, and she wants him to learn the consequences of having been a neglecting husband and all of those things, which again, I'm sure without going to the same lengths as her, a lot of people can relate to, that when they're wrong, they feel this desire to punish people and this need for justice. And I think that is where, from a feminist point of view, people do hold her up and be like, look at her, she's going for it, she's punishing this man who's making her life terrible.
Yeah.
Although she takes it too far. So we talked about it in the beginning, but another great thing about this is the production value. This is such an example of a movie that if you had a slightly less good script and a slightly less good actors, or even if you had those, but it wasn't well directed, well scored, well shot, it would definitely lose a couple of points. So we're going to talk about the production. But before we do that, we're going to have a little segment by our sponsor, Concave Brand Tracking, where we're going to discuss the product placement in Gone Girl. So Gone Girl had 123 brands, which is quite a lot. The top 3 brands were Samsung, because of all the TVs that are shown in close-ups, NBC, because of the news, and Ford. Other notable ones that you might recall included the St. Louis Cardinals, Dunkin' Donuts, Leffe Beer, which is what she's drinking when they first meet, and Mountain Dew, which is what the friend, the hillbilly, is drinking when she spits in it. With an estimated over 800 million lifetime views, these brands have collectively generated over $600 million in media value, with a brand like Dunkin' Donut getting 11 million and Leffe getting 5.6 million. So if you have a brand that was in Gone Girl or any other movie, you can contact us at concavebt.com or info@concavebt.com to find out more about product placement valuations in movies, as well as competitive information and any other data questions you may have. So the music, apparently the music is, it's not one of those where I can actually hear it, but you can feel how the music sounds. Like, we remember how it makes us feel. And the brief, which I think summarizes it perfectly, apparently David Fincher instructed his heads of score, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. I've seen conflicting stories about whether it was a spa or a chiropractor, but he wanted music that was meant to relax you, but he is perceived as creepy and makes you feel uncomfortable, which I think we all know that kind of music. And that is exactly how this movie feels.
Yeah. I don't think I really paid attention to the sound of the movie until the killing scene happens with Neil Patrick Harris. And I can feel like I can hear that in my head.
It's not one of those where there is constant music, but though, especially the opening scene, the one with the crack in your head, it is just this, could be interpreted as passive, relaxing, but it actually instills a sense of dread.
Right. That sounds fitting.
Yeah. Then obviously it's really well directed, and it's really there's so much attention to detail, and it's well put together and all of that sort of stuff, which is staple of David Fincher. But the cinematography, as for me, stands out the most in terms of something as simple as I was going through it again, looking at this specifically, but the color palette. Anytime you're seeing stuff from Ben Affleck's point of view, there's a blue tint. Yeah. So the suburbia, he's often wearing blue. The house, when he's with the police, it was very just this dark, ominous blue. It's not dark, but it seems dark because it's got this blue tint. And then most of the time when it's Amy, so whether it's her talking about her side of the story, or when it's her doing the flashbacks, especially the flashbacks, it's very yellow. It's very bright, almost like a dream. Because we don't actually know if the things we're being shown about how they met and stuff is how it actually happened.
Yeah. It
could be, again, the false narrator, and she's just making it seem better. So I think that contrast is super interesting.
I had mine down as blue/grey because I wasn't sure, but I thought that was the color palette that came across.
Yeah. It's very, very blue.
But yeah, Twilight green.
Yeah, grey blue.
Yeah.
And there's actually this the one shot I could find, well, where she's actually blue is when they're leaving New York, leaving the brownstone and moving to Missouri. There's this shot in New York where they're coming out, and I don't know if she's wearing blue or white, but the point is it's very blue tinted. And to me, this represents the fact that she's being sucked into his world.
Yeah.
She's moving back to Missouri, she's leaving New York and everything, and And yeah, and then when they get to the house, the same thing. That's it. She sometimes is in the blue tint, but that's usually when she's living in his world.
Yeah.
Which takes us nicely to their house. We would love to live in a big house, but then this one just seems horrible. There's space, it's nice finishings, and obviously there's the context of the fact that it's in one of these empty lots, but you don't see that as much
Yeah.
in the movie, but it just feels hollow and sinister.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up, just some themes that we can maybe discuss for a couple minutes. What do you think this movie tells us about marriage, gender roles, love?
Things aren't what they seem. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty big one.
Or maybe like the more that someone pretends to be perfect in a couple or individually, maybe it's more of a signal that they're actually not.
Yeah,
I don't know. Yeah, that's all I've got for you. What do you think?
I've thought about this completely separately from this, but this whole idea of when people date and stuff, the fact that they're putting on... I mean, it's a cliche that we grew up with as millennials, but this whole thing about be yourself...
Yeah.
It's a cliche for a reason. You know, anytime we have people who say, oh, you know, not people are asking us for dating advice, but if someone were, and I know it's a cliche, it's sort of be yourself is true for this reason, because the fact is, if you're not yourself, the fact that she complains about being the cool girl means that it's not coming to her naturally.
Yeah.
And that's a problem, because it's unfair to both sides. It's unfair to her that she has to put herself in that position to attract a man, but it's almost unfair to him, because exactly in the same way that she's mad that he's not the man she fell in love with, by definition, she's not the woman that he fell in love with. So I just feel there's this toxic thing that is very much of, not just our time, but of the last 20, 30 years. And again, part of it is modern, the fact that women are much more, they're not fully equal, obviously, but they're much more on a same level as men. You meet in New York, you both have a job, maybe you don't want kids and all that sort of thing. And so it's a different dynamic than what it was before, when there were these old school patriarchal arrangements. But I think this shows that a lot of the things that people thought are the way to do it now don't necessarily work. And one of them is, for the girl trying to be a bro, for the guy trying to be super impressive and suave and stuff, because ultimately he just regressed back to who he really was, which was this slob who just... Because he's not happy with Amy, obviously, at the beginning of the movie, but he obviously likes... The only thing he doesn't like about his life is pretty much her, because he obviously enjoys hanging out with his sister, he enjoys drinking, he enjoys hanging out with his stupid high school buddies and working in the bar. This is, now that life has punched him in the face a lot, this is the life that he wants, and she's the only thing that's in the way, which is why the whole idea of killing her does make sense for a while. And yeah, it just seems like an analysis of the consequences of doing things wrong.
Yeah.
I guess would be it, in a nutshell. Another big theme that comes up is about the role of the media and the public perception. I feel like we've touched about the books and how she has this need to make her life into a show. But I guess the thing we haven't talked a lot about is about all the media attention they get throughout. Yes, that says something about us as a society and about the news, but it is kind of one of those that people are interested in it. So can you really blame the press for covering it the way they do?
No, I think like we've seen this sort of thing play out before in like real world disappearances and stuff. And I don't know if it's fair to bring this up here, but like the Madeleine McCann thing, like the amount of the way her parents were, and obviously still to this day have been scrutinized for like not, basically making mistakes when it all happened, but also how they showed up certain times at certain press conferences. If they didn't look disheveled enough or upset enough and all of that sort of stuff, like it doesn't come from nowhere. I feel like this is what actually happened, so it's fair for it to have been depicted that way in the film as well.
I think it's easy to watch it and say the media is to blame, but the fact is it takes two to tango, in a way that they make a press conference the day after she disappeared. The police decide to do it. Ben Affleck goes along with it. The parents go along with it. Obviously, the parents are already in the public eye, and they play that to perfection of the grieving parents and stuff. So I think it represents this sort of give and take of the media, is that they're only going to give people what they want. They're only going to give viewers what they want. And obviously everyone is obsessed with the story. It's every character is watching it, and so they're getting what they want. But then also that the media is only taking what is being given. And the fact is that all of the individuals here are giving the media lots of stuff to work with. They're giving interviews about the Amy book. They're using the press for their benefit. So to me, the idea that the press is then using them for their benefit I think it's a very two-way street, and not necessarily this, oh, the media is evil, thing that people like to say. I think that's just gotten a bit, yeah, even nowadays, people complain about this in sports. I'm going to go off on a slight tangent here, but about the fact that debate topics in sports, all sports on TV shows have become that, is you have two or more people, they'll talk about a player or a team or whatever, and basically one person needs to say something, and the other person needs to argue the opposite. And the fact is, if that wasn't popular, that someone would have tried it and it would never have worked. It wouldn't be done again. But the reason why everyone does it is because that's what everyone... I mean, I don't even know if want to watch is the right thing, but ends up watching. And in this case, people want to watch these stories about beautiful couples who might have killed each other. And, you know, the fact that there are real life stories similar to this, that the true crime documentary explosion in the last 10, 15 years, podcasts, all of that. So I think we very much get the media we deserve.
Yeah.
So one last thing about morality is there anyone who's moral in this movie, actually?
Probably his sister. Well, maybe not in the end, because she's kind of covering up for him when she knows that he's had his mistress round, but...
No, I think she's the closest thing too, because she is loyal to him, which obviously is a more or less moral thing.
But she is moral in the sense that she doesn't just blindly support him. She does say, like, you fucking idiot.
Yes.
When he is being an idiot. But then when he comes to her with the credit card stuff, she's like, I can't believe I didn't see this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, I'm going to support you. So I feel like she does have morals.
Yeah, she's the only one, because obviously we know the parents, not really. Him, no. Her, no. The press will have ulterior motives. The lawyers will have ulterior motives. Yeah.
Yes, he does.
Yeah. I read this quote from the author, which I think really encapsulates the point of this, but also why it's so fascinating to watch. The whole point is that these are two people pretending to be other people, better people, versions of the dream guy and the dream girl, but each one couldn't keep it up, so they destroy each other. Him in the more passive way of just, you know, just crumbling away and becoming horrible to be with, and her in the very in-your-face way of framing him for murder. And I think, to me, that encapsulates everything. That's why it's interesting, because it's something that maybe people can't relate to directly, but everyone understands that concept of pretending to be someone else to impress someone, pretending to be someone to impress yourself, but then falling into that, and then just a slow, sad destruction of two characters. And I think that's to me why both the story and then the characters. I think you can have an interesting story with average characters and interesting characters in an average story, but this movie combines both.
Yeah. That was just actually a better way of saying what I had said. So, yeah. So, yeah, same. I think it has a lot of twists and turns. They're both interesting characters to watch. And, yeah, it's just very entertaining.
One last point. I've read this in two different places. The people do draw parallels with Fight Club, as this is it's a very different movie, but it's almost the female side of it, of the result of this society where, as that quote says, pretending to be different other people. Obviously Fight Club is saying the toxic culmination of what happens when men buy into the dream of, you know, consumerism and sex appeal and all that, and then realize that it's all a crock of shit and rebel against it. And this is more okay, if I'm the cool girl and get my pussy waxed and I'm fun and I go and move back to Missouri with your dying mother and I do everything I'm supposed to, and that doesn't work. This is kind of her version of rebelling against it. And yeah, I think that's quite an interesting parallel. But so with all that said, where would you rank this movie in your all-time list, Lee?
It's somewhere in the 20s, I think. But I don't know exactly. I've never made a list for myself. I think it's somewhere in there.
That's
and
fair.
Yeah. So it's pretty high up.
It's very high up. So I actually have a list. It's a fluid list. Eventually, I will put it up online when we've done a lot more of these movies. But for now, as things stand, for me, it is number 36 all time. It's currently ahead of Team America World Police and The Butterfly Effect, which we will be doing one of these days for sure, and behind Inception and Catch Me If You Can. But something I realized doing this was, despite being number 36 all time for me, it's still only number 5 into the year 2014, which, looking at this, makes me realize that 2014 must, again, this is all very subjective. This is Dom's list. 2014, the 4 movies that I have ahead of it on the year and in my all time are John Wick, Nightcrawler, 22 Jump Street, and The Edge of Tomorrow. And looking at that, I'm saying, no, I love Gone Girl, but I do put all 4 of those higher than it. But what a year for
Yeah.
cinema. And there's other movies that go below it, like Whiplash, which are also amazing as well. But yeah, so both of us putting that movie firmly in our top 50. So hopefully at this point, if you've gotten this far, you have already watched the movie, because otherwise we've given a lot away. But really the hope of this podcast is that maybe this is a movie that you watched once or twice years ago, and hopefully we've given you guys a lot to think about, and having finished this, that you're excited to go watch it. So please go watch it wherever it's available. Please leave us comments on Instagram or YouTube or wherever you're listening to this. Your thoughts, things you think that we'd have missed, things that you agree with, that you disagree with. And make sure to follow us on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And tune in for new episodes the last Thursday of every month, as well as bonus features in between the main episodes. But from now, thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon. And thank you, Sonita, for being part of this great episode, doing one of our favorite movies.
Well, thank you for having me.